I've been hanging out with you guys for a while now, but I don't really know where you came from earlier. Like, what were you doing before you got into Tolarian Dropouts and before you got into Flesh and Blood, Alex?
Sure. So, I'm originally from Miami. I'm half Cuban. A little known fact about me, if you meet me and just don't really know my background. Um, I moved up to Orlando on the count of my fiance. She works for a company up here,
Hmm.
and I work remotely, so I had the flexibility to be able to move up here and be with her, which is awesome. Um, So, when I first moved up here, I didn't really have any friends. It took me a really long time to make some friends, to be honest.
Oh,
And it
really?
was rough. Yeah, it was rough. I have a really rich background in playing card games. Like I've played Magic the Gathering since I was about 11 years old.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, wow.
and
And I saw you top eighted a while back, right?
yeah, oh, that's funny that you found that.
I think
Yeah, I
AJ
was playing
found
like in
that.
a standard event. Um, yeah. So I mean, I used to play. I wouldn't say professionally, but certainly more than just casually. I've always been like a very competitive person when it comes to my hobbies.
Mm.
And what I really enjoy is like when there's other competitive people there that like kind of draw me to be like better at my competitive. I always do that in anything that I do that I'm interested in. I always surround myself with people that are just way better than me.
Hmm.
And I like to learn off of that because I feel like that's really how you can get better at something.
I think that's a really great mindset too, because I used to be really into ping pong in college. And I
Mhm.
learned that too. It's where if I hung around people who I was better at that I just beat their asses, I never learned. I never got better. The way you
Absolutely.
really got better is when someone would just beat your ass constantly over weeks and months. And then finally you start getting better and better because you go up to their skill level instead of,
Yep.
yeah, that's good,
Yeah,
man.
100% agree with that. So going back to when I first moved up here, so it was kind of weird, man. One of the things that I thought was really weird about Orlando
Hmm.
was it was like backwards as far as what I had understood about kind of social breakdowns in communities. So in Miami and South Florida, typically people don't really have time to like be nice to you. It's not even that they don't have time. It's just like there's so many people. There's a lot of transients going on in
Mm.
Miami and South Florida. People are just on the go. You'll probably never see this person again. So a lot of people are just rude to each other. And it's not even like I don't even think it's that they're just intentionally being rude. It's just like this on the go mentality that like I got to get to where I'm going, and like
Mm.
anybody else that's out there are just like I don't really care about them. I'm just gonna do my thing. I'm never gonna see this person anymore,
Is it like
anyways.
big city vibe, like New York, like, everyone for themselves, the rat race kind of thing?
I think I don't know, man. Like I think even New Yorkers are like almost nicer, man.
Oh,
Like it's
wow.
weird because like I think New Yorkers get a bad rep, but I think if you stop somebody on the street in New York and you ask them for some help or something, I think they'd definitely be down to help you. In Miami, it's like I don't even want to like if somebody comes up to you and tries to talk to you, like you don't even want to hear it because you just know that they're trying to sell you some bullshit already. Like it's
Mm.
just how it is. So in the that's how the kind of vibe is in general. But when you get into the gaming communities, like that's where these are like the social outcasts of that type of culture. And these people are very welcoming. They're nice. They want to get to know you. I feel like it's like a lot easier to kind of break into those communities and make friends and just like meet a lot of people. And people are willing to, open up to you, which again
Yeah.
is like not what you would expect from the culture and the social vibe in Miami, but when you get into the gaming communities, like that's kind of what I experienced. So I really love that. And now, switching it up, coming up to Orlando, it's again like people are very nice. They say hello, they wave
Oh,
at
yeah.
you. I'm jogging around my neighborhood, people will wave at me. I'll stop, I'll talk to my neighbor, I'll find out a little bit about them. And the service industry, people are very nice, they're very cordial. So I was like, oh man, this is like really refreshing. But what was weird was I went into the gaming communities,
Hmm.
specifically Magic. Like I didn't really come to play any Yu-Gi-Oh or any other card games or anything like that. But so I tried to come into these Magic communities, man, and I tried for like weeks and months to break into these communities. I gave people my phone number, like I like asked them like, hey, can you add me to your group so that we can like get together and play cards? Like I don't know anybody here, and like maybe that was me coming off as like sounding a little desperate or something, but I just couldn't break in. I really, you know me, man. Like
Oh
I'm,
yeah.
I feel like I'm a pretty personable guy. I try to be respectful, but also like I'll try to meet you, I'll try to talk to you and find out what's going on. And so I was just really having this challenge with breaking into what I was comfortable with uh down in South Florida. And so it was kind of depressing. I was really like I like stopped going to F&Ms. I tried to play Legacy so much, man, like and nobody I'd go to we had a cool stuff right by my house. One of the This is a kind of a funny anecdote.
Mm.
Um when I was moving up here, I never saw the place that I was moving into. My fiance, at the time, she was my girlfriend.
That's a lot of trust.
She completely, yeah, she just completely picked the place that we were moving to. I had no idea what it looked like. I think she might have sent me pictures or not, but one day I just like packed up all my shit from Miami and was like, all right, I'm moving up. And I moved up here, and I just like, first time I stepped into the door, like, this is where I'm living, and I lived there for 2 years.
That's crazy, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it was pretty wild.
that must feel really weird. And I've heard that, a little bit in the past where people try to get acclimated into like a play group or into a community in their local scene, and it's tough. And
Hmm.
I personally haven't experienced that, but it just seems really tough because it's you're like, hey, this is another person to play. Don't you want to like grow,
Right.
the player base? But
Yep.
yeah, in any TCG, but from Flesh and Blood, man, it's been crazy. Like I thought honestly, I didn't think people were gonna be very welcoming to me. I didn't know what was gonna happen, but as soon as I walked into Cloak and Blaster, like you, Rob, AJ, everyone was just like, "Hey, Bronson, what's up?" And it was like I knew you guys for like years. It was just like all friends, and it's weird because like I see all you guys, and I'm like, "Oh, these guys have been friends for like 3, 4 years." But you guys all met in like the last 6 months or so, right? Like how'd that
Well,
happen?
it's been about a year now that we've all been friends.
Oh, nice.
And you know what? Like going to that point of what you said, where you felt really welcomed into our community.
Hmm.
So, um, like I got into Flesh and Blood because my name. So finally, like I guess let me just finish off that. I
Yeah,
know I
your
kind of went on a
story.
tangent there about anything. About what I was. Anyways, the point was one of the biggest selling points was like, oh, Cool Stuff's main headquarters was right up the street from where I lived. So I
Hmm.
thought I was like, oh man, there's so many Magic players. It's gonna be great. Whatever. Anyways, didn't work out. I ended up meeting AJ. He was one of my neighbors, and he came over one day and was like, "Hey, I want to show you this new game called Flesh and Blood." And the only way that I agreed to play with him, I was like, "Hey, man, I got two Legacy decks. Like, you'll play me in Legacy a couple rounds, and then we'll play Flesh and Blood, and I'll definitely do it." And so we did. We played, and I had a good time. And
Mm,
so I started checking it out. But so that's how I kind of like got introduced to the game. But on your point about the community and how the like what I explained the community up here was how that's not how the Flesh and Blood community is. That's because I did my damnedest to make sure that our community was not like that. Like I
yeah,
wanted our community to be welcoming. I wanted our community to be respectful. I wanted our community to be
just
just not
inviting,
what I experienced. Yeah, not what I experienced when I walked into these places and I tried to break into the community. I did not want that at all.
Yeah.
Um
I think that's
I
a really good
Yeah,
takeaway for anyone, honestly. Even if you've been in, your local scene for a long ass time, if you see someone new, just be nice to them. Include them in the
absolutely.
conversations and just be a nice person. And even though it's not the funnest to like go over and be the welcoming committee all the time, but I think it's really important because the more you do that, like that one little butterfly effect moment of you just going in and say, hey, my name's Bronson. What's your name? And do like a 10-minute chat. That could make that person come back, for months and
Absolutely.
get into it, and then they draw more people. It's like a multiplicative thing. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I feel you, man.
Absolutely. And I think Rob's a buddy that I met through Flesh and Blood as well. Now we have quite the history together, and we're playtest partners. But he has a great sense of being able to do that. I myself am also quite a social butterfly. I like walking up to people and talking to them. But I think Rob's also just like, "Hey man, my name's Rob. Nice to meet you.
Yep.
What are you about? How can I help you? I'd love to see you play this game with me." And he really helps drive and grow that community as well. I think AJ has been really great at that too. AJ's done so many times he stayed like extra, or he's come on an off day to help teach somebody or help somebody play. And he's been a really kick-ass judge too. And I've always I've always respected that. I just will come up with these really off the wall rules interactions, and I'm like, hey AJ, how would we handle this situation? And he'll spend some time googling it, or he'll like go and talk to his judge buddies, and they'll like mull it over, and then he'll come back and be like, well, here's the ruling, and I'll be like, oh man, this is so great, and it's some like just
Well,
the
yeah, because some
weirdest
things
like
haven't been
kind of niche
totally
stuff.
fleshed out, right? Because you were
Yeah, yeah.
talking to me 2 days ago about Art of War and some like crazy next level thinking, and when you have these different cards that do these different effects, they can really make the rules be like, wait, what happens in this scenario? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when especially so like again like I played Magic for a really long time.
Hmm.
I never actually became an official judge, but I was like pretty intimate with a lot of the rules knowledge because I was playing at a high level competitive. Not a I'm sorry, not a high level competitive, but I played competitive and I like wanted to be at high level. But there were like some, intricate rulings and stuff that would go on. And when you have like a new game, there are some things that are not like readily intuitive, and the way things are ruled on sets a precedent for how those things get like judged on in the future. So sometimes I even hear AJ like there's like rulings where like, oh, this is the ruling, but like he's like, I don't agree with that
Mm.
because it doesn't like maybe it doesn't flow right, or it doesn't make sense in his mind. For me, like I don't ever try to like uh I don't ever try to like make it make sense in my mind. Like I just try to remember the ruling. And sometimes like what I'll do to like kind of flip it on its head is like I'll try to make sense flavor wise. So I'll just make up some crazy like flavor thing. Like, oh, like if Art of War ended up retroactively doing some crazy thing, well like the artwork on Art of War is like a god literally picking a dude off the thing. So like maybe just a deity like stepped in here and did something in the rules interaction that was just kind of off the wall there.
Yeah, it's like a mnemonic or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you met these guys. You met AJ first, who's close neighbor. And you met
hmm
Rob, and this was like what you said a year ago.
Yeah,
So this was around
it was
Arcane Rising, right?
a little bit, yeah, exactly. Like so I officially bought into the game. I bought my first actually the first thing I bought was a case was Crucible Release.
Hmm.
But I had played like about a month prior to that, so AJ showed me, brought over a couple decks and we played a couple games. And
What drew
then for
you
that,
into the game? Like, what did you like out of the first couple games? It really was like, okay, this is good shit.
so the hero that AJ put me on was Katsu.
Hmm.
And as you know, Katsu's been my sort of the deck of choice for me for most of my classic constructed. I do bounce around a little bit, but I just feel like that's to help myself kind of get grounding in what the other heroes are trying to do.
Hmm.
Um, but what I really enjoyed was like, so one of the biggest things that drew me in was like what I like, and this is like such a cliche. I feel like a lot of people say this, and I've said this a lot of times too. It's like in Magic, there's like two things, two or three things that like kind of bother me, or can like I think it like bother most players. So one thing is like they call it getting mana screwed, where you don't get enough mana, so you don't have the resources to play
Yep,
the cards in your hand.
it fixes
Like
the mana
sucks.
problem.
Yeah,
Yep,
sucks. So
it
Flesh and
does.
Blood kind of didn't have that. The second thing is like getting mana flooded, which is the reverse of that, right? Where you just draw all lands and you draw like no cards to cast. So Flesh and Blood didn't have this resource system; it had a completely different resource system, and so that was like very interesting right off the bat. And I know like there's been like every card game that's come out after Magic has always tried to like fix the mana problem,
It's true. Like
but
Hearthstone and all
Magic,
these.
yeah, like
Yep.
everything that I've played, like even like Yu-Gi-Oh, like, oh, we're not gonna put resources, like the resources are gonna be the cards in your hand, or Pokemon has energies, or there's just like Final Fantasy did something similar to Flesh and Blood, where you would discard cards and use those as your resources as well.
Oh, that's
And you
cool.
could also like, so it was like hybrid, sort of like you can play lands that are called backups, and then you could also like pitch cards from your hand to then like use them as resources. But
Hmm.
so that was like the first big thing that like kind of like I was like, oh, this is like pretty refreshing. And then the second thing, one thing that turns me off about Magic, um, which I'm gonna say this, like I still love Magic, I still play Magic. But one of the things that I feel like is a big turnoff for players is like really one-sided games,
Hmm.
where some deck just either trounces the other deck, or some interaction happens, or like whatever the case is, a person draws poorly and they just like the game just snowballs so crazy, and it's just like a very one-sided game. And that's why in Magic you have like best of three, so that sort of doesn't happen, but it still can, which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Because like
So
once they start snowball, then there's no getting back. Where in Flesh and Blood, if somebody pulls out a ridiculous turn, you can still get back.
you
You have
can
a
build
chance at
back. Yeah,
least.
you can
Yeah.
claw your way back into the game, I feel like.
Yeah.
Which I think was actually showcased pretty well on our game the other day in the tournament that we just played in.
Oh yeah, it's so
Um,
good, man.
That was pretty awesome. But yeah, so the thing that I wanted to mention was like in Magic, games that are like non-interactive or just like very one-sided games, I think was something that is a bit of a turnoff for a lot of players. And the best games that you ever have are like where one player does something and the other player interacts and the other player does something and the other player interacts and there's like this back and forth and it's like this really tight game. Those are the best Magic games. So what
Yeah.
I immediately picked up on in Flesh and Blood was that the game was designed to be very interactive throughout the entire experience. And so like that was just great. I loved it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just really you feel like you're very intense, especially at the end of the game. Like when you and I are playing some games, and it's like on the wire, and we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's like you have like 2 or 3 health points. It's scary, and fighting. Going up against you, Alex. I think you versus anyone else are really into the psychology of it. I don't know if you openly admit that or say that a lot to people around you, but I can say it, or I've seen it when like we played our first game together. Like I felt like I was being exposed, like I was naked. Like I had this turn where I just took the damage, and then I played my crippling crush dominated, and you were like, huh, you had some interesting mannerisms there, and I was like, what does he see?
What did I
But
tell? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but like, tell me more about that, honestly, because I'd like to learn that more from you because that's something that nobody talks about on a competitive scene. I don't hear too much chatter about, but I think is very important, especially because I've been playing a lot of Bravo with CNC Pummel, and it's like it's a mind fuck. The person's like, oh, do they have the pummel or not? So if you can
Right.
read people, you can get so much advantage. So tell me about like that aspect because I know you're into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think any competitive edge that you can gain as long as it's not like unethical or cheating, I think is like fair space.
Mm,
I do I've throughout my career, like in my professional side, I did a lot of analysis work, so I can be like pretty analytical. I also like in the game really early on, I noticed that a lot of our Flesh and Blood games were going to time, and it was like frustrating for me because I always noticed myself like having made all my plays and just having thought about everything like beforehand and just like coming into it and just doing my turn and getting it done with and then moving on. And then one thing that would happen would be like I'd like swing my one Kadachi and my opponent would sit there and like go into the tank on like one damage and I'm
yeah,
like, bro, come on, like
take
what
it
are we
like a
doing here?
man.
Like you're
Yeah.
thinking, and I like here's some things that I notice about players is like a lot of times when they get into an opponent's turn, the first attack that comes out, that's the first time that they think about what am I doing next turn. And
Good
so
point.
I feel like that's sort of uh, a beginner to intermediate level skill that you're showing by doing that. It's like, what am I doing on my next turn? The expert levels of players kind of already have a couple turns like planned out ahead of them, and they're kind of moving in this path of what they are attempting to do in this game.
Mm,
Um, Regardless of, I've said this many times, regardless if two players show up with an aggressive deck or a controlled deck, one player is considered the aggressor and one player is considered the like control or the defender, or is sitting in a more controlling position. So
mm. Like at the
that's like,
table, their body is like positioned in a way.
well,
You
not
think?
just the body language, but like in the physical game itself. So like if two players show up and they're both playing aggressive decks, like let's say it's aggro Katsu versus aggro Katsu. One Katsu player in the game is definitely the aggressor, and the other one is like the defender or the like kind of controlling. And those roles can switch throughout the game.
Mm,
But being able to identify at what point in the game and when it's appropriate to be one or the other, or realize that you have to start pivoting from one to the other, that's when you start getting into sort of like intermediate to next
yeah.
level like skill. And so going back to the whole psychology thing, I like really early on in the game, I like was like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm not like playing like like decks were like 80 cards, and a lot of people they'll just go online and just like net deck, and they're just like, well, I'm just plopping this like 70 something cards on the table, and I'm just gonna play everything. And
Yeah,
like I always like was like, and I try to get my play group to be like, hey man, like find cards that you need to cut right away. Let's find the cards that are like good in these matchups or not good in these other matchups, and let's trim the deck down to get to the deck that you want to be against whatever hero or against whatever archetype you're playing against. So that will help you identify in the game at what moment are you the aggressor, at what moment are you the control, at what moment are you playing some combo. What do you need to do in those each of those roles?
yeah.
So,
No, I totally agree with that. And I think like net decking is good to just get and just play the game. But
mhm,
after a while, I think it's you're really doing a disservice if you just don't think about and you're just like, oh, I downloaded a deck list from Nick Murphy. He won a tournament and like that's the best Kasai deck ever. No, like you gotta like mix and match and do what you think. I learned very early on. I mean, well, not very early on. Like after a while playing Bravo, I was like, dang it, I just can't do good against Dorinthia's attack reactions or Ninja's attack reactions. What do I need to do? And I listened to Kieran and Carol from Session Blood, and they were
mhm,
talking about zero cost defense reactions. And now
mhm,
I have like I have like 9 of them in my deck because they're
yep,
just so good in Bravo. It's just
mhm,
it's so good to like defend out. But if I had looked at a bunch of deck lists out there, nobody's running that many defense reactions. But it works
right,
for me because like
mhm,
the meta, like you said, like you got to look at the meta. The meta's around like Ninja, Warrior, and all these like on hit type of heroes with a
mhm.
reaction. So if you have a lot of defense reactions, you can really stop them dead. That's what I've personally figured out. But if I had just kept net decking like the entire time, I would have never figured that out. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And like testing stuff against like, oh, even if you net deck, like the net deck doesn't necessarily like now there's some things that are like they're coming out with sideboards and stuff, and it's helping people like kind of understand more of like what you play against here and there, and it's trying to get up to speed where a new player can just like look at something and at a glance be like, oh, I need to play this and this against this and this.
yeah,
But like when the game first came out, it was just like the Wild West, and it still for a little bit is kind of considered the Wild West. But like I was like a big, like I said, I was like a big advocate of like just trimming down the deck, whatever, play that card that you don't know if it's good or not in the matchup, and like you think it's good in the matchup, and like you just find out like, oh, this is not good in this matchup, and then you learn, and then you're like, all
yep,
right, cool, and then maybe you even learn like, oh, I don't even need this card, I don't even see this particular archetype or even hero in my meta, so I can just cut these cards entirely and switch over to something else. um but so the reason why I kind of brought this up was since I was doing that, like I was trying to sort of not force that on people, but I was trying to sow that mentality early on in our play group.
hmm
Um, I started noticing that since my turns were just like done very quickly, or when I was like I had swung with that Kadachi and they're just tanking on the Kadachi, I started realizing like either ticks or tells in my opponents. So like that was where the kind of psychology came.
would it be like in
And
the lips or the hands, like you're putting hands or putting your cards like a certain place on the table, or
Yeah, I don't want to call out my boy Rob, but he knows the tick that I called him out. It's actually kind of cool. No, you know what? I don't think he does it
what about
anymore
me?
because
You
I
can
call I, I
definitely
I
call
called him
me
out
out
on
on
it.
something.
I'm trying to think, man.
Yeah.
There's it's hard. Like I feel like I know Rob's exactly because there's so many times where I sat across from him and he did exactly the same thing, and it wasn't until like I razzed him about it like twice, and then I think he started getting keen on it and was like, oh, I need to stop doing this. And ever since we became playtest partners, he knows like some of my mannerisms and stuff too.
hmm
But I could still throw him for a loop on some stuff. But like this one thing that he did was like he'd take here, I'll just give you an example. Like he'd have his cards in his hand,
Uh huh.
and then he'd be like, okay, so I came in with an attack, and then he'd be like, all right, cool. And I see a lot of players do this too, not just Rob.
Yeah, they
They'll
do
take
the
the two
shuffle.
cards. They do the shuffle, that's cool, whatever.
hmm
That's like, that's just like, oh, I'm just like mulling it over or whatever. But like they'll take, let's say they like take their two cards and they're like, okay, I'm definitely gonna want to play this card, and they'll put it on the table, and I definitely want this card, and I'll put it on the table. And then they're like, all right, all right, I'm gonna block with these cards. Do I want to block with these cards? And then they'll think about it. So then in my mind, I'm like, all right, cool. So the opponent has already let me know that they have two cards that they definitely want to play the next turn. And that's something that you can pick up on that's like pretty like open and out there.
Mm.
What Rob did was he would take his cards and he would like tap them down on the table, and he would just tap them and tap them and tap them. He would tap them. He would like tap them like this, and
Uh-huh.
then tap them like this, and tap them like this, and then tap them like this. And so I was like, all right. So that's like a tell that you have, that you're telling me like these are some important cards that you have in your hand.
Mm.
So that does a couple things. If I ever have a card that happens to allow me to discard something from their hand,
Mhm.
that's like unconscious information that the opponent is giving away to me by being like, oh, these are like sort of the important cards. And so, that may or may not matter. I'm always a big proponent of like when somebody's getting ready to discard something from my hand, I take my hand, I shuffle it in a way that I don't see anything, and I just put them face down on the mat, because like I don't want to psychologically give away anything of me looking at something and being like,
Oh, for
oh
sure.
no, he discarded this thing, or oh yes, he discarded the
So you
right
just put
one.
them
I
on the
don't.
mat?
Yeah, I just put them. I take my hand, I put it face down, I shuffle it, and then I just put it right on the mat, and I say, do your worst. If you're gonna intimidate me or you're gonna discard my card, figure out how you're gonna do it. I don't even want to know what got discarded. Sometimes when I get intimidates, I don't even look at the card they intimidated. I just like, all right, whatever. And then, are you done doing all your stuff? Now that you're
That's
done doing all
smart
your stuff, then
because
I
they
pick up
can't
my
read
hand and then
you
I,
if
yeah,
you don't know.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think to give an example of this scenario breaking out, because I think it happens a lot more than people realize. Like I remember I actually watched a stream that AJ from Adventure Code Gaming, shout out to him, he did recently where you and Rob were playing Sunday at the
Mhm.
Collective, and it was 3 turns till the end of the game. Prism versus what was it,
Dorinthia,
Dorinthia,
yep.
and Rob attacked you for I think 7, and you had like a full hand, and you didn't know if he had a go again, if he had attack reaction go again, like a glint or something, and that is a perfect example because if he had a glint, then you were kind of screwed because he'd glint it, draw a card, attack again for 7 as well, and then that would have given it. I think he would have had a much higher chances of winning that game. But you instead, you just said, "I'll take it," and it popped a bunch of prism counter things, the soul shields, and then you took like 3 points of health. But it was that decision in the game that really kind of I think that could have turned the game. I don't know if it could or not, but I don't know if you agree. But because if you blocked with 2 cards from hand, then you'd be 2 cards down. So I think it's those moments where you have to really either know that you're effed either way and just do the best decision in the moment, or realize, okay, I don't think they have it, and yeah.
So, this is one of these things. So, Dorinthia specifically, I've been so fortunate to have Rob as somebody that's in our local meta as my testing partner, because I've gotten so many
Oh
reps
yeah,
in against Dorinthia. I've played Dorinthia a lot. AJ also, his first hero was Dorinthia, so I've played Dorinthia till I'm like basically blue in the face.
same.
One thing that I could say about Dorinthia is the coolest thing about Dorinthia, and the biggest disabler about Dorinthia, is it's a bluff deck. It's a big, big
Yeah.
bluff deck. And so the mechanic Reprise, um, if you know how to play around it, if you know how to block it appropriately, then that's how you dismantle Dorinthia's plan. And there's so many things that a Dorinthia player will try to do to back up that fact. So if they're in an all-in plan where their opponent is just blocking with cards from their hand, a Dorinthia player can dismantle you in like
Oh
4 or 5
yeah.
turns. Like, you're absolutely punished for playing the game like sort of the way that you think you're supposed to, which is with blocking with cards from your hand.
It's so true.
So
Isn't that
yeah,
weird?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so like again, I like really am thankful that I got to play a lot against Dorinthia, and I learned, how to kind of duck, dodge, weave, and get around some of those reprise triggers. So what you were seeing in that turn was, in my mind, I was like, well, you know, if I block with some cards from my hand, then I turn on anything that he has with reprise. I have enough health here that I can certainly just, even if he pounds in with another attack reaction,
Hmm.
that comes in for 6, my life total was at a place where he's not going to get the reprise trigger on whatever thing he's pounding in with.
Hmm.
And if he does sling go again on it, his attack wasn't going to come over for the amount of
Of
uh
damage that would do lethal.
spectral shields that I had.
Yeah.
So or yeah, or with damage that was gonna do lethal. So I was like, well, so psychologically I'm like, well, so if he gives it go again, then his sword gains go again, but his sword can't attack again unless he has a twinning blade. And then if he does have a twinning blade and he spends the glint, he spent 2 cards out of his hand, and I still have a full grip of cards that I can block with. So the second attack, if his first attack doesn't hit, the second attack I feel a lot more comfortable about dropping some cards on the table and maybe turning on reprise. So that's kind of how I like thought about that particular situation.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I want to echo that same fact, man. I'm so thankful that Rob's played a ton of games with me too, and it's just I'm really grateful that he's like taken the time to teach me and like, hey, here's what you do, and I played as Dorinthia a ton, and like getting my ass whooped tons of times was great because it's like I learned from you guys, and you guys have experience wise in the U.S. I know Rob is number 1. Aren't you like number 4 or you're top 10?
No, I've dropped quite a bit. I didn't. So I
But still,
think
you
like
guys
the
got a
online.
shitload of games in. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, 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 100%. I think I'm ranked number 7 right now. At one point, I think my highest was ranked number 4. But
Oh,
like,
nice.
yeah. So like, but absolutely, you're right. Like, I've definitely played like a lot of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. A lot more than I have.
And yeah, and I've played a lot of recorded meaning like for experience and like at the like competitive level. But I think that brings up like a good point and potentially a good segue. Like when I met Rob,
Hmm.
um, so like I guess let me take a step back. So how our group of folks built our community, I think was like a really awesome way of doing it. And I've talked to AJ about this. I think when we did a podcast together, I sort of touched on this a little bit, but like we AJ had been playing Flesh and Blood at Cool Stuff for like a while, and Cool Stuff was just like,
Cool
we're not
stuff.
gonna carry it. Yeah, like I mean, he like took like he'd play Pokemon there,
Yeah.
and then he would take his Flesh and Blood stuff and play with whoever would play with him. He just wanted to get anybody to play with him,
I never heard this story. That's hilarious.
and so like he would go up to he had like
Well, no, it's
AJ has like
great, but
some
it's just it's ironic because Cool Stuff never sold Flesh and Blood. They still don't, which is
they
odd to me.
don't, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you got to hear this story. It's definitely if you haven't heard it before. So he had a really good relationship with some of the TOs and managers at Cool Stuff. And so
Hmm.
he'd go up and he'd be like, "Hey man, like why don't you guys carry this? Like if you put it on the shelves, like at minimum, like I'll buy it. Like you might as well like carry it."
Yeah.
And they're just like, "Oh no, we're not gonna carry it." And so like when I finally like I remember AJ's like, "Hey, I'm going down to Tampa to buy some boxes of Flesh and Blood." I'm like, "Yo, let me come with you. I want to go get some too." So after that, I was on like all right, now we need to make a scene happen. I was like, we have to do this because I want to be able to play and I want to be able to play competitively.
Mm.
So I like went to Cool Stuff a bunch of times. I was like, hey man, can you guys carry this? And I always got shut down every single time. And so the store that my fiance at the time she was my girlfriend, she
Hmm.
worked up here for I think a year, almost 2 years before I actually moved up here to live with her. And so every time I'd come up to visit her, if it was on a Friday, I'd always go to F&M at this one store. It's called The Collective.
Hmm.
And I always had a really good experience there. I was like, man, these people are really great. One of the guys that worked there, this guy Xander, shout out to Xander. He doesn't work there anymore. He now works for Wizards of the Coast, which I think is awesome.
Oh, nice.
Uh, he always remembered my name. He always asked me what I was playing. He like so everything I mentioned about Orlando before about how like nobody was willing to talk to me and everybody was kind of had their cliques and all this type of stuff.
Hmm.
He was not like that at all. He was very friendly, very nice guy. So I had an idea pop into my head and I was like, hey AJ man, like let's go by the collective. Let's see maybe if they have Flesh and Blood. If they don't, I'll just ask them if they'll carry it.
Yeah.
And I asked them, and
Never
they
hurts
said
to
they didn't
ask.
really know anything about it. Yeah, they didn't really know anything about it. And I was like, man, it'd be really cool if you guys could carry this. I was like, I know about 4 to 6 players who are like interested in buying this off of you. And they're like, all right, whatever. Like oh whatever. So what I did was on our Discord, I told each one of those 6 guys, I was like, hey, tomorrow call the collective and tell them that you're interested in buying Flesh and Blood. And so I got
That's
each one of
smart.
them to call on the phone and say, "Hey, if you guys had Flesh and Blood, I would definitely buy it. If you guys had Flesh and Blood." And I called them about 3 more times that week. I finally walked in there. I talked to Brendan, who's the store owner. Said, "Hey, man, I'd love to have Flesh and Blood if you guys can get it for me." And he said, "Hey, I'm gonna ask about it." So the next time I came in there, I saw him, and he's like, "Hey, I found out we can get it. We're gonna get it for you guys." And I was like, I was like, awesome.
Hey,
So I was so happy. So my next
that's
goal
smart.
immediately was like, yeah, like my next goal after we got them to carry the product, my next goal was like, all right, we need to have armory events. I want to have armory events. I want to get these cool promos and stuff. So I told Brendan, I was like, hey man, if you let me register your store, I'll handle all the stuff as far as TOing goes for doing Flesh and Blood.
Hmm.
And he was like really open to that idea. All of the other card games that they had somebody in the community that was like their TO already. So me stepping up to be like, hey, I'll run this for you guys. He was really happy for that, and I was
It's a
ecstatic because
win-win.
then I got to like sort of pull open or look under the covers or look under the hood and see the inner workings of like how does this stuff go and how does this stuff work, and that really let me put my personal touch and like build that community the way that I mentioned before, where I wanted it to be this very welcoming, uh, you know, happy, friendly community that would just like, you want to come play Flesh and Blood? We'd love to have you. We'll teach you. We'll help you get cards, whatever you need. You let us know, and we'll get you there. And so that was just a heaven sent. And ever since I got to like TO there,
Hmm.
they were very welcoming to us. They set us up on a day. They sold us all the stuff. We bought all their product, man. Whenever they couldn't keep it on the shelves, man. We just kept
That's
buying
too
it and buying
funny.
it and buying it. It was so good.
That's a
And I
great
told,
way to do it. I never
yeah,
heard this before. Like, if you want a store to carry a trading card game,
call
just
them.
have like six of your buddies
Yeah,
constantly call them for three
yep,
weeks until they
absolutely.
get it. I mean,
Until
that
they
sounds
finally
like a
carry it.
good, and it worked out for them because they got
Yep.
the boxes and like it instantly sold. And was that like Crucible War and stuff? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not even like, this is gonna sound wild, but like, so Crucible, like at some point we had like Crucible fatigue. Like we were like, fine, we'll buy Crucible, but we want some like Welcome to Wraith, we want some more stuff, and we kept asking when are they gonna get Welcome to Wraith? And what's really funny too is like, um, we were very plugged into the Flesh and Blood community. It was like very small at first, and so we knew like all the announcements that LSS was making. We had been on the main Discord. We had heard about the delays and shipments and stuff. And
hmm,
so I'd come into the store and I'd be like, hey Danny, or hey Brendan, like, do you have any news for us about Flesh and Blood? And at first they'd be like, oh, no, no, no. And I was like, well, this is what I heard. I heard in 2 weeks you're going to be able to get some stuff. And he's like, oh, really? He's like, I'm going to go to my representative at our distributor and I'm going to tell them that. And so I was plugging, the guys at the collective to tell their representative, like, hey, we need to get on this. We need to get on this. And that's exactly what happened. And so like they kind of saw that we were like so plugged into the community, that we were like finding out when they were going to get product before they found out that they were going to get
that's too
product.
funny.
We found out what armory kits were coming out before they knew about it, and I was like hounding them. I was like, hey Brendan, make sure when you go down there you ask for that armory kit. He's like, I Brendan gave me his personal number, and I'd like text him and call him, and I'm like, hey man, like, what's going on? And Brendan was always a great sport about it. He like, dude, he like really opened it up and let us just like run away and really look. I like, he took care of us, so I can like, from the bottom of my heart, man, it was like I really appreciate what he did. I think it was awesome, and that's what, like, again, that's what let us grow this community to be what it is now.
Oh, it's amazing in this area. And what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like autonomy, Like
Yeah,
people who are want to champion a game and they work with their local game store to, not only, foster the community but be like a TO because, I think a lot of people don't realize that, when you're a store owner, it's hard to be a TO as well because like, that takes time and energy. Not only do you have to manage the shop, but you have to, judge, do all this stuff and all this stuff in the end. But if you have this, a guy like you walk in the shop and say, "Hey, I'll hand all that BS that's a big time suck. I'll do it all for you, and I will literally like buy all this product as long as you order it." It's like
yep,
it's a win-win, honestly.
yep,
But that
yeah,
sounds so cool.
yeah. And
And
so, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, one thing I like too about the collective, you were talking about your personal touch, is you guys have really cool things that I really think Legend Story Studios should like implement like on a mass scale. Like there was this thing where every month is it you have like you write a bunch of names down on like the People's Champion. How does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah. So um, one of the things that we've like found out early on when we started playing was like we got the armory kits and we would do it just like purely based on um like
Like wins and stuff?
performance. It was like, yeah,
Performance, yeah.
performance based. So like if you performed really well, then like you'd win the mat. And like if it was this week that the mat was up and you won, then you just won the mat. And we started noticing that the mats were like going to like just a couple players, and I was like, oh man, this like kind of sucks. So like I got together with AJ and I kind of talked with people in the community. I said, what could we do to try to find a better way to distribute like this stuff through the whole community?
Yeah.
And so I went and I read through the FAQ for armories, and they talked about how like the people's champion mat is supposed to be somebody who champions the game, who really steps up and is like a shining beacon of excellence for the community. Is what I always that's like the thing that comes to my mind when I think of the people's champion. So yeah, we did a lot of like mulling it over, and the way that we handle the prizes from the armory kit at the collective
Mhm.
is you get two mats, you get the four cold foils or some variants of that, and then there's a bunch of promos that are like full art of some class. So we always top eight, like those promos are just like straight performance based. If you make top eight, you just get one of those full art promos, and that's just how it works. If we have any extra promos at the end of the month, we just like we'll hand them out and whatever the case is. For the cold foils, those are also performance based. We hand those out to first place. And then
That makes sense.
when there was kits that had like a crazy brew and something, or like a blasphemophet and a something else, we would give first place the choice of whichever one they wanted, and then second place would get whichever one was left over.
That sounds
Now,
legit.
yeah, for the mats, I think the mats are like it's so interesting in Flesh and Blood. I think it's kind of unfortunate that mats aren't just readily available for people to pick. Even the brown, like just the basic brown,
Yeah, that one should be pretty
the
cheap.
original mat. Like I not even that it should be pretty cheap. It's just that I think that like they should just make it so that people can buy it. Cause
Yeah.
like the big thing about getting into the games, like you want to have a mat, you want to represent that you're playing the game. So going back to the mats, um, there's two ways we handle it. One mat, the like generic mat,
Hmm.
um, every time you show up to the collective, your name is put into a raffle, and at the end of the month during our store championship, we raffle off that mat. So if you showed up at least one time during the month, then your name goes in a hat, and you metaphorical. We don't actually have a hat, but your name goes into the pool, and we just randomly roll it and raffle it off. The People's Champion mat now, like we read that this was supposed to be like a champion of the game, and so
Hmm.
like I think AJ and I really took that to heart. And so what we started doing was we started after every time you showed up, you got one vote for a person that you thought deserved to win the mat for the month. And that person could not be yourself. So you should not be voting for yourself. It
Yeah.
should be somebody else that you felt like did something positive in the community, and that's why you're voting for that person.
And that
So
voting
that's
system makes
yeah.
sense. It's like the players champion. It's like all the players get to vote on who they think should get it, and it really
Yeah.
is cool because I've seen people get the mat, and they might be a newer person in the community, and they're having fun, and it just the look on their face like, oh wow, like this is
Yeah.
awesome, this
And then to know that all of these people voted for you
yeah.
too is it also comes like I feel like it sort of swells like it swells that like hype factor for you. You're like, oh man, like this really like all these people in this community like they voted for me. Like yeah, it's like pretty cool.
Yeah, and the Monarch release, I really like how the collective handled that as well. Like everyone who had known Monarch before Monarch was even a word got like a case because they pre-ordered like months and months ahead of time. But then they had where you could come into the shop every day and you got like what, one or two packs that you could
You could
buy?
buy
I think
one
just
pack,
one.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
was perfect because they
So
had Monarch First Edition for like what, two
they
months?
still have
Like
it. They
they
still
still
have it.
have it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they
I
ration it out. It was very smart.
I so back under the covers about that. I'll tell you how this worked out. This was
Hmm.
fantastic again, and I spoke to Brendan, and Danny is one of the other guys that works there. Danny is like one of the liaisons. He works on Sundays and helps he runs a store
Yeah,
while
he's
we
a
like
cool
play in the store.
guy.
Great guy, I really love him a lot too. Awesome guy, has a great attitude too. He actually started playing the game too, so like we got him
Yeah, I
into the
played
game, and
it
he
against
never
him.
played card games before, and we got the
Really?
first card game he ever played was Flesh and Blood, and he got
Wow,
in the game with us.
that's crazy.
So what happened was, when Monarch was getting ready to come out, uh, in confidence, Danny and Brendan told me what their allocation number was,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, uh, yeah, I mean, I get it. I know you guys tried to order much more than you guys wanted, but you guys got allocated. We knew about the allocations again because we're in the community. We know what was happening.
Hmm.
So I just went to Brendan and I was like, hey man, as much as like me personally, I would love to be able to buy a case from you. I would love to, I would love to be able to buy as much product as you'll sell me.
Oh yeah, at like that
But
$100 mark.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly at like the
when they were
exactly
like
at
four
the
hundred
at the
dollars a
sweetheart
piece.
deal. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And like, and we warn them too. We warn them about people that are just trying to get what we call free tendies.
yeah,
So that's like just people trying to buy the boxes, sit on them, or buy the boxes, crack the cold foils, and just immediately sell them, like just trying to get free money. And so that's like not great for the players. So I reached out to Brendan and I was like, hey man, if I have to sacrifice myself and our entire community has to sacrifice ourselves from all being able to buy a case, I would much rather you do that. Hold on to as much of the first edition that you can and let us have drafts and sealed events.
yes,
If you let us have drafts and sealed events, because it cool like Monarch first edition came out, and then it was supposed to be 1 month later was when Unlimited came out. And then there was also in the past, we like not that we got burned by LSS, but like it takes time to ship from where it's coming from to the distributors, and then the distributors have to distribute it out to their local distributors, and the local
yep.
distributors have to send it out to the store. So
The
there's like
supply chain's
tons of
crazy.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
logistics alone can push you having product in your store back a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who knows? So
yeah,
so
and there
we had a
were
lot of
gaps in
delays.
time. Yeah, right. In the past, where people didn't
Absolutely.
have that much product. Yeah,
Absolutely. And we felt that a little bit. We felt that, and the collective, like I'll tell you, they did their damnedest to not make that happen, and they were really awesome about it. But when Monarch First Edition came out, they created an allocation system that worked out like just so well for everybody. All of the people who were their core players and stuff, they sold them a box at a sweetheart deal, which I thought was phenomenal. They did not have to do that. They sold us these boxes at this really sweetheart deal, which was
that was really
awesome.
good.
They had a pre-release leading up into the release of Monarch at 12 p.m. They couldn't sell it until the Friday.
Yep, I was
So,
there with you.
Thursday night, we went in there, we did a sealed event of Welcome to Wraith, and we played up until 12, and then we got our boxes, and everybody
Yep.
cracked their boxes and had a lot of fun. So that was really awesome, the first thing. And that was all Brendan. He came up with that.
Hmm.
Then the second thing, or the thing that like I just told him, I was like, man, the players, I told him we would even sacrifice prize support if it means that we had more drafts and more sealed events. I told him, I was like, it'd be great. And so they came up with this allocation system where you could come in every day, you could buy one pack and you could buy it for
It's
$10.
honestly
Which
brilliant. When I first heard about it and saw it, it works, and
yeah,
it makes it so like when a local game store gets all their product or first edition Monarch, it wasn't like, oh well, we sold it to the four people who pre-ordered like 20 cases each, or
and
not five
you don't
cases
even
each.
have it for a day or even
Yeah,
2 days on your shelves.
yeah. Whereas the
So yeah,
collective even has it now and today, and
they
man,
still have it.
Alex,
Yep.
I remember that night too because I was playing that sealed event and all of us got our boxes and you were standing there. It was late as it was really late. You're tired and everyone was cracking their box and you're like, I don't know if I should open it. I think Rob was even egging you on. He's like, just open the thing, man. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just open it. And I think you like started getting like crap pulls and it was like, oh man. But then you pulled the library, right? Like,
Yeah.
what was
So
that feeling?
I'll talk to you about what was going on in my mind. Actually, it was pretty crazy because I remember this. So
Yeah.
I was standing in line, and I saw them like kind of pulling out the boxes. What they let us do was they let us buy, I think it was like three first edition packs, and then or maybe it was one first edition pack, and then your box. And so I had been standing in line, and I was like kind of towards the front, and then the person that was 2 spots ahead of me, they like opened the pack and they got a cold foil from their like one loose pack, and I was like, oh man, I was
Oh,
like, oh, I don't want to buy that, I don't want to buy from that box anymore because we just know that there's not gonna be a cold foil. So I went all the way to the back of the line.
oh, that's smart.
I went all the way to the back of the line so that by the time I got up there, I'd have another shot at getting something. Which TLDR or spoiler alert, I didn't get anything from the one pack.
Mhm.
But so while I was waiting in the back of the line, the guy standing right in front of me, which is a good buddy of mine too, Festus, uh, like him and I were standing in line, and like
Uh-huh.
we're kind of standing next to each other, and he was like, "Go ahead," and I was like, "Nah, dude," I was like, "You go ahead." And so
It's not like that
I sent him
psychology,
up.
like which one's gonna get
I was like,
the
yeah, I was like, you go ahead, bro, you go ahead. And so he went up, and so I was in the back of the line, and all of a sudden I hear all this commotion, and it was, oh my god, oh my god. And we had played an entire week of pre-release up to that
yeah.
point. we still had not seen a library. Man, I must have seen 14 cases opened at least or something from all the events that we went to, all
Oh,
the people cracking packs and stuff. I
some
saw a lot
crazy.
of product open.
Yeah, and I barely
Didn't
saw any legendaries too. Like I saw Matt from the Fab Arsenal. He got the what is it? The chest piece for the Rune Blade, and I saw you get the Vestige of Soul.
the vestige, yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
Rob
other
pulled
than
an
that,
eclipse.
oh yeah, Rob pulled an Eclipse, but we didn't
Yeah.
see any like library that
Yeah.
whole weekend.
Yeah,
So
I was like so shocked. And so I hear all this commotion and then I hear people screaming and losing their minds. I was like, "Oh, somebody got a library." And then I look, I was like, "What happened? What happened?" And they're like, "Festus got a library." And I was like, "Oh my god." I was elated for Festus. I was like, "Oh, this is so
I
awesome."
know.
But in my mind, I was like thinking, I was like, "Oh man." I was like kind of like, "Well, that's probably the only library that's in this like allocation that the collective got because like how like a
Yeah, what are the
library is what
odds?
1 in 20 boxes or 1 in however many it
One in
is.
40.
1 in 40 boxes, right, right.
Yeah.
So 1 in 10 cases, right, is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So 1 in 10 cases. So I was like, oh man. So like the chances of me getting another like getting a library out of my box was like I was like it's like probably not gonna happen. So I went up to finally buy my box, and the craziest thing like they had a box set aside with a sticky note with my name on it. So I didn't even like me like taking a step out of line and going all the way to the back. Like it didn't even matter because they
Yeah.
had already just set aside a box for me. And so I got my box and I was like walking back to the table and everybody's like, "Yo, Alex, you got your box?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I got my box right here." And I was like, "I don't know if I'm gonna open it." And then they're like, "Oh, come on, just open it." And I was kind of like feeling like I was like, "Oh man," I was like, "I'm probably just gonna get hosed in this box. Maybe I
Yep.
shouldn't open it." And then I sat down. I saw like Nick and I saw Ryan, and I was like, you know what, man? I was like, I'm around all my buddies. I love these guys. This community is great. I'm just gonna open the box with my friends. I'm just gonna have a good time. I don't care what I open, dude. I'm just gonna open it with my friends.
Yeah.
So I started calling everybody over. I was like, hey man, open like let's just start opening these packs, bro. Let's just go. And so we started opening, and like Ryan pulled like a foil Sonata Arcanix, and I was like, oh, that's
Oh
cool.
yeah.
I was like, sweet, a foil Majestic, looks really sweet. And so I like,
That's the foil to
kept
get too.
going.
That one looks beautiful.
I ended up giving it to Ryan actually.
Oh, nice.
I just like gave it to him on the spot. I was like, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah, I really like this card. I really need it," and I gave it to him. So, and then so I opened like 4 packs, and I like open the pack, and then like I just see the library, and I'm just like, "Oh, wow!" Like I got a library, and then like Nick is like, "Oh my god!" And then like everybody just started screaming, and I was like, "Oh man, this is so cool!" And I just like kind of dropped the rest of the pack on the table and was like, "Oh cool," and like put it in a sleeve or whatever, and like showed everybody I got a library. It was like really cool. And Nick's like, "Dude, you didn't even look at the rest of your pack." It's like you got a majestic in this pack too, and I was like, "Oh man, like oh that's so awesome!" Like so yeah, it was quite an awesome
That's
experience. And then
wild, man.
we took a couple of pictures, Festus and I, and I think we took a picture with you even.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great experience. Great
Oh, I can't
experience.
imagine. Because at the time too, I think the card was like 4 grand or 3 grand. It was an insane amount of money in these cards. It was essentially like going to a casino where the payout was like 4 to 1. It was just
Mm-hmm.
nuts. But
Yep.
I mean, I just love how, to like the collective, they're just doing. It seems like they're doing it all good. The people who
Yep.
are really fostering community, like you and AJ, and a lot of other guys. You know, reward them for being on the ground floor, and like, hey, like they all gave you a box. Monarch at
Yep.
a good price, and then
Yep.
everyone else, like, you can come in the store and get a pack a day. I remember there's this one game store we went to. It was near the coast, right? And this guy I met, he said, "Yeah, I live like 5 minutes from this game store, and I literally go here every single day to pick up a pack of first edition Monarch." I think he went for like 40 days straight and just pick up a pack a day. I mean, it's smart because I mean
Yeah.
it incentivizes. And hey, you're in the game store, you buy a pack. Oh, I need a deck box. Oh, might as well buy the deck box. Oh, I need this thing.
Absolutely.
Buy more. So it incentivizes that. But
Definitely.
that's cool, man.
So yeah, I think again, just one last like I guess one last plug for the collective. I think they've been a great beacon of shining example for what a card store how a card store can foster a community and really grow a community. And like I think it's I don't know how well known it is, but I think Orlando has quite a name for itself from the from the community standpoint. and like from the competitive side. So actually, we haven't even really talked about like how we sort of like all got into the competitive scene and like really I think like once I met Rob, the
Hmm.
way I met Rob was like pretty funny too. I went on the main Discord and so oh yeah, so I was
Yeah, I
kind of
love
telling the
hearing this
story,
too
but
because, like, just for like reference, I went into the what is it, Cloak and Blaster, and I see all you guys. And I feel like you guys are friends like forever, and you've always done. But like, it's funny to hear all these like stories of how each person met. So like,
yeah.
yeah, so you're in the Discord.
Yeah, so well, just going back, so I started kind of telling the story, but like I became the TO for the collective,
Hmm.
and so I just wanted to drive more people to come out to our events to have fun and to get into the game and stuff. And so I went in. There's like a part of the Discord that says um US um US tournaments or US stores, or I forget what the specific channel is.
Verbiage.
But yeah, so I went in there and I was like, hey man, Central Florida, Altamont Springs, we have games, we do them every Sunday. And so I saw Rob looking for games in there, and I just messaged him and I was like, hey man, like we have a upcoming event on Sunday. I'd love it if you came out. And sure enough, he came out. And I feel like almost immediately when I met him, like we just both started pulling out this like competitive drive in each other to just like,
Yeah.
play the game well, teach each other, learn some cool stuff, one up each other with some tech or some sweet play or something like that. So that kind of drove a lot of the competitive side of the Central Florida scene as well, and it's only been growing more and more. And our events have just gotten like they gotten pretty big, they gotten pretty competitive. I talked to some folks throughout the US, and like they tell me, "Oh, I show up to my armory events and I just always win my armory events because the people that are showing up are just like either like not competitive or they're not trying to get better or
Hmm.
whatever the case is." I think now that we're sort of rolling into Road to Nationals, and more of a competitive scene now in the US, now that like everything's been announced, I think now people are sort of ramping up and gearing up to get in that mind state and start trying to play at that level. But like we've been doing that for like a year now, a little more than a year now. So that's been like really great for us. I had like a little bit of reservation at first. I know the type of person I am when it comes to hobbies. I am very like competitive by nature, but I didn't want to alienate my friends in any way because they were competitive, but like I don't know if they were quite like had the same type of competitive appetite that I had, where it
Hmm.
was like even reading body language, going into just the craziest like things that you could think of. Um, but once I met Rob, like I felt like it was okay. Like this was an outlet for me to explore my like crazy competitive side, and him and I would just like just go at it and just really and we enjoyed it and it was great. And then that allowed sort of the rest of the community to explore and get in that space as well. So I didn't feel like I was necessarily alienating the first group of
Oh, for
guys that I
sure.
started
Because
playing with.
I feel like with competitive spirit, it's really kind of a double-edged sword. I think there it can go to a point where it's just a little bit too far, and you come off as abrasive and all that. Not
Hmm.
you, but just in general.
No, yeah, yeah, I hear
But
what you're saying.
there's definitely something to where it's good. I'm personally not very competitive to begin with, but as I've been playing more of Flesh and Blood, I've seen myself grow more of like trying to compete, trying to get better, and it's just that feeling of it's kind of like a rush, when you're
Yeah,
playing someone who's at your skill level a little bit higher, you're just like you're just all these things are coming in your head, and it's just really an intense moment, and it's fun. Like it's tough in the moment, and you're trying to figure out, and you're like, oh man, I misplayed here or here, but it's more of a like cat and mouse game of you're trying to read the person, they're reading you, but I think it's good to have that spirit to begin with, because if you don't, you're never going to get better. You're never going to get
yeah.
like really good. But if you go too far, then it can go into the you know
I
opposite.
think yeah, definitely to speak on that point. I think what's great about our community is that even though you have a lot of the like top players in the US here in Central Florida, I don't think we're uh like abrasive and
Oh
like
no.
abrasive or just like chip on your shoulder or just like
And that's the
you know,
best part about it, you know? It's like you guys are just very open, like, hey, we want more players to play the game, and I'll be in
able to get better. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll be in one of those when we were doing the online blitz things, like you and Rob especially, like a lot of the times you like, let's go, like let's do this, and yeah,
Yeah.
it just gets everybody riled up. It's great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
What I notice about other games is that sometimes when you have the like really highly competitive players, they just like I said, they just have a chip on their shoulder, or they just have this like, oh, you're just so beneath me that I'm not even gonna play you or whatever. Like I don't buy into that shit at all.
yeah,
I just so much rather like you know what? If I could teach you something and you get better because of it, at some point, you're gonna come and kick my ass, and I'm gonna learn something from you. You know what I mean? And
oh
that's
for
gonna make
sure.
me better. And there's ways of looking at situations that I can't do it because I have my life experiences and the way that I deal with situations. And there's somebody who comes in who has completely different life experiences in the way that they approach and perceive situations. So I'm gonna learn something from them, and I that's what I really enjoy. So
Yeah,
being like so to sum up our play group, to sum up our community, I'd say like we're definitely very competitive, we're
yep.
definitely very friendly, very open, and very welcoming.
It's in that middle
So
ground. Yeah,
coming
very
like coming
competitive, but
into
also
coming
yeah,
into our scene, you're gonna get run through the meat grinder for sure. We don't hold any stops. We'll
yeah.
definitely teach you, we'll definitely show you what's going on, but we'll be very nice and welcoming about it. So like, welcome you right into that meat grinder and help you get on feet as fast as you can.
We'll kick your ass, but we'll say please and thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely,
No,
absolutely.
but honestly, I really am happy that it's like that. Honestly, because there's no way I would have progressed nearly as fast as I have, and I'm still learning every day, and I still want to get better as a player. I'm getting there, but I can definitely see like now my turns are just so fast, like compared to when I first started. But if we can transition too into you know, final topic, I think so. Road to Nats, man. So you are part of the Tolarian Dropouts crew now, and what are you guys up to? Like, what are your goals as a competitive player in the next like year or two?
Sure. So I definitely going into Road to Nat season. One of my big goals is to. So I have like I don't know. Maybe this will come off as a little pessimistic, but like I feel like it's more realistic. But I've been told it's pessimistic. So like the dream goal would be like go to an event, crush it, get first place,
Hmm.
get that full art tunic, definitely get my invite for nationals. Then I'd be super happy. Uh, Maybe a little bit more realistic than that. Go to an event, get in the top four, get my invite to nationals. I'd be super happy. My plan and my goal is go to the road to nationals, perform as best as I can. Road to Nationals has a higher modifier in XP points
Really? How
than
much?
regular armory events. I'm not sure what it is yet. I gotta go double check, but it definitely has a higher modifier.
Mm.
So playing in a bunch of Road to Nationals, trying my best at these events, and just doing the fundamentals of my game, trying to improve and trying to play as best I can. Hopefully, will rack up enough points for me that if I don't end up making a top four in all the Road to Nationals events that I play in, then getting enough points to get me into Nationals. Really, I really, really would feel uh, accomplished just getting into Nationals. I think that would be really awesome for me. And I think that's definitely my short term goal. I'm definitely looking forward to calling season as well. That's going to be awesome. I think
Yeah,
being able to finally, I've made so many friends and people in this community that I've never actually met in person, to be able to go to Vegas and see them all, or Cincinnati or Texas or Orlando, wherever the case is, whoever I get to meet, whoever I get to see in person, hanging out with these people, pitching cards, swinging attacks,
yeah,
doing all this stuff, I think is going to be that's really what I'm excited about, seeing the community really getting out there and just growing as much as I can, putting my positive influence out in the environment and just really trying to trying to have a great time.
That's awesome, man. Because it is completely different. Like before I went out into the community, it's just night and day. Like you meet people, like I had talked to you on Discord a couple times before, but just meeting people face to face, that's how you like build bonds and build out the community.
Absolutely.
But with Road to Nats too, what hero decks do you think are going to be really popular? Like we were talking earlier tonight, even like the tank prism seemed like a thing. I see that buzzword a lot.
Yeah,
Like what kind of decks have you seen, and what are your thoughts like on that? And then maybe like chain. I've heard a lot of people talk about chain.
sure. I think yeah, I think Chain will definitely be out in force. I think, you got your classics like Dorinthia. I think Katsu is a draw for a lot of players too because Katsu has a pretty interesting play style. It's been winning a lot of events recently. I think players that are new and want to be competitive
Hmm.
will take a look at the most recent deck lists that have won events, and we'll just try to play that list and try to win. It makes sense. I think Prism. There's a following on Prism just because of like waifu or whatever. People are like, "Oh, Prism is my bay, so I'm just gonna play Prism." And I get it. It's cool. I think Prism is a pretty sweet deck. I played it this past Sunday. I've been trying to get a lot better with the deck, just because it's got an interesting play style. I feel like the version that I'm on can swap kind of between this sort of mid-range aggro game into a mid-range control deck, depending on what your matchup is. So that's cool. I like the versatility of the deck.
Hmm.
It has like so many lines of play that um what's frustrating for me sometimes is like I'll play it and then I'll feel like I'll lose the game, and then I feel like I felt like I didn't really learn anything there because like it's not obvious where I misplayed, or it's not
Hmm.
obvious where I like made mistakes. So I'm sticking with it. I'm checking out Prism. Not to say that that's definitely what I'm gonna play at RTN, but I'm trying some stuff. I definitely think Bravo is gonna be out there. Bravo is just sort of like we've talked about this, like old
Yeah,
faithful. Like
I'm
if
gonna be
you
running
got the
them.
if you got the fundamentals of Flesh and Blood down, which is like blocking, setting up sweet turns, and playing the strategy that you're meant to play, those roles that I talked about earlier, like either the aggressor or the defender or the combo or whatever the case is. If you got those fundamentals down, I think Bravo's a really solid deck. I think it'll
Hmm.
do really well. Um, and then I think you'll be sprinkled in with like some Bolton players. Um, I don't doubt that. Like I'm sure I'll see brute players out there. I think Reinar is still a really strong deck.
Oh, he's super
Um,
strong. Yeah.
yeah, really cool.
What do you think about chain
Um,
though? With the, I think a lot of people are gonna run chain, but his
mhm.
variance seems a little all over the place. Do you think that's gonna be an issue, or?
Yeah, don't let my opinion influence anybody at all, man. But I was going into
I love your opinions.
CC season. I'm happy to give it. Going into CC post Monarch release,
Hmm.
I was really high on Chain. I was like playing Chain till I was blue in the face. I was like, oh man, this is really cool. It's a very aggressive deck. It can definitely beat you in the short game. It can certainly grind you out in the mid game, and then if you like are like a little pitch fiend where you're like remembering all of your pitches going up into the last pitches, like it definitely will reward that behavior as well because you can just set up some really nasty riftbind turns.
Mm.
So I was just like really loving life playing that deck. But like what was happening to me was like you mentioned, sort of the high variance situations when I would banish like pretty bad in the mid game.
Hmm.
And my turns were just kind of I call them like anemic turns, like they're just kind of like sort of limp or just not great turns.
Yeah, because if you don't
There's
get the
sometimes
gas, if you soul
yeah
shackle
yeah
like 5 cards and banish, and only one is blood debt.
yeah something that you can use, something that could turn the tide, then
Yeah,
it gets a little demoralizing. And so it like I feel like personally the type of player that I am, I would rather lose the game because I made misplays or I made mistakes in my deck versus me losing the game because the variance off the top of my deck is what caused me. And like you could
yeah,
argue
I
like
totally agree with
if you're
that.
a good player, you could balance out that variance by playing really well with chain and still being able to do some stuff with chain regardless of your banishes. But
Yeah, But
the amount
you're
of
still gonna
times
have
that I
that
got
variance.
into yeah, the
Yeah.
amount of times that I got into just like not like really feels bad moments, I felt myself getting frustrated, and I was like, this is not why I play the game. I don't play the game to get frustrated, and I intentionally don't play high variance decks. That's why I've never picked up a brute deck before, to be
Yeah,
honest with
like
you.
KO, like it's way too much variance. And you know
I
what?
you know
I'd be interested to think or hear what you think about my idea for Chain. I think the best way to play him, I think we're definitely going to see a deck like this. You have all copies of Sink Below, all copies of Fate Foreseen. You use them all, right? And you put all the cards on the bottom of your deck that are Blood Debt, and then mid game, you just start shackling. And then all you're going to
uh,
get is gas because you've literally you sink below your fire and you fate
sure,
foreseen your fire and you just keep putting
interesting.
all your blood debt in the bottom and then later game you just like blow out because everything is gas, you know?
Yeah,
Anyway, I just what do you think about
that's
that idea? Isn't that
that's
cool?
actually so. I like. I'm not even lying when I tell you that like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was like, if Katsu could just play a bunch of defense reactions and win the game, and Bravo could just play a bunch of defense reactions and win the game, and Dash can play a bunch of defense reactions and just win the game, then why can't every hero? So I just
It's
went
a
through
good
like I
point.
ran down the list of all the. I was like, could Azalea do it?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Could Kano do it? Maybe. Like if
Chain
you
was like
if you
here
just
at the
like
bottom.
stack your deck. I thought about Chain at first, but I didn't. When I thought about it, I kind of passed on the idea because I was like, oh, um, my thought was like, I'm gonna start shockling on turn one.
Yeah.
If I start shockling on turn one, then that plan that we just talked about is bad. Like you're gonna
Oh, it's
lose the game.
bad.
But now that you mention playing all the defense reactions, sending everything to the bottom, and then shockling mid game,
Yeah.
like burning through all your opponent's like kind of gas and stuff,
Yeah.
that's like kind of interesting.
Because then at that point you bring up another good point. Your opponent's gonna have like poo poo at the end of the game when you're gonna have like your just complete fire at the bottom of your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, man. I you
I
know,
gotta try to run it.
I like it, dude. We should get together and do like a brew session on it or something.
That sounds fun. Yeah, because right now I totally feel you with that. Like chain, it's like if you can get that gas and you can get the Art of War and you have like the perfect Exodia ham or hand, you can just go ham on your opponent and just completely
Yeah.
dominate. But
There's
then if you don't get that, then you just get completely
there's a
wrecked.
lot of there's a lot of really like crazy feel good moments in Chain.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I realized that shadow puppetry gives whatever next attack go again and +1, and if it hits it does the banish thing. And I played shadow puppetry and I saw that I had a command and conquer in hand, and I was like,
Oh.
God, it feels so good. But like there are those really like I feel like in Chain the highs are really high,
Yep.
but the lows are just so low, and I couldn't deal with the lows being
Is he
that
like
low. Like
heroin? Like when you're
yeah,
high, it
yeah,
feels so good, but when you're low,
yeah.
it feels so bad. I mean,
I just couldn't deal with that. That was not where I was trying to be on.
yeah. I mean, any other heroes that you're really gunning for, like maybe Dash, or who do you think
I
is
think
gonna
Dash has a
surprise people?
place.
Yeah,
Yeah. What do I think is gonna surprise people?
yeah, like Kano,
Um,
or
I think here's what I'll say. I think the Kano players out there
mhm,
that show up will take people by surprise because what I've been noticing is a lot of players in our meta are not packing sideboard cards for Kano. So
mm,
I think, and there's a saying amongst our play group, uh, and we use it over and over, and it's not just for this specific matchup, but it applies in a lot of situations. So the question is, what's the game plan for Wizard? And the game plan for Wizard, the way that we say it is, just kill the Wizard. So like they're like, oh, we're just gonna race the Wizard. That's what their game plan is. They're just gonna race the Wizard.
yeah,
And so I've used it for like a lot of other situations. Like if I don't have sideboard cards for like let's say Dash or whatever, then they say, oh, what's your game plan for Dash? I'll be like, just kill the Wizard, man. Like that's what you got to do. Like just kill the Wizard.
that's too funny. No, because honestly, I don't screw around with that. I run 4 no rune in Bravo, and I think just kill the wizard is a bad idea. I've learned
I
that very
agree.
fast. It's
Yeah.
when you play against Dash, you want cards, or when you play against Kano, you want cards in your hand. Because I've had
Mm-hmm.
so many times where I've just blown all my cards, and the Kano's like, "Oh, how many cards do you have? Oh, none. Oh,
Oh, you
okay.
don't have
I
anything?
do
All right.
like
Let me
28
play 7 cards.
damage."
Yeah, let
Yeah,
me play 7 cards in one turn. Yeah,
GG.
for sure.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway,
Absolutely.
thanks for talking with me tonight, Alex. Is there anything you want to plug at the end, like who you are, or just how to be a better person? Oh, I actually, I want to hear too, like, what do you think people coming out, like, how do you get better at the game and stuff like that?
So I've actually given this advice, and the advice is gonna sound like not advice at all, but play the game a lot more than you're playing the game. Um, accept useful feedback from your opponents that you find that are beating you. Um, and like, looking to mentors is cool. Just get out there and try stuff. I mean, that's really what I did. Like I said, I didn't like when I always told you like I would always try to find people that were better than me.
Mm,
Well, our whole play group like started sort of together, and yeah, like you have the players in New Zealand that are like the high competitive level players. It wasn't until like recently, within the last 6 months, that I ever even got to play anybody from New Zealand. So, um, you know, like I just would say, just practice as much as you can. It might help to I feel like different people learn in different ways.
hmm.
So I feel like for you, for instance, like you picked up Bravo and you just played Bravo and you like,
Yeah,
I need to learn how to play Bravo the best, and then you learn your matchups by playing Bravo against all of these different matchups.
I picked the
So
easiest hero.
well, I mean, I don't even think he's the easiest hero because I tried Bravo a couple days ago for the first time and I got trounced. Like I didn't know what I was doing, and I started realizing I was like, oh, Bravo's not this just like play a bunch of big things all the time. Like you have to set up turns and you have to like really think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the other advice I was going to give for the people that learn in a different way, like sort of subscribe to this style of learning is like I'll play a deck for a little while, and then I'll jump on another deck and I'll play it for a little while, and then I'll jump on another deck and play it for a little while. And what that does for me is it allows me to see what the different game plans are by playing the deck versus by playing the one matchup against all these things, and then learning those, like learning each of the intricacies of the deck, help me learn my matchups for when I play the other heroes against the deck that I played
That's
eventually.
smart. So you can get in their mind and you're like, okay, I know what they're trying to do to me.
Yeah, I would like try to picture a hand that I had and like how would I cobble together a turn against myself, and then that's I could like envision like, oh, what's like the worst case scenario that they could have against me? Well, the worst case scenario that they could have against me is some of the best case scenarios that I had when I was playing that hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
Well, thanks,
So
man.
that's what I
Really,
would say.
I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Bronson. You asked me if I had any plugs. My plugs would be you're an awesome dude. I definitely say check out Bronson's content. If you're looking at the content, keep watching his stuff. I think he's an awesome dude. Really, I was so happy to meet you in person, and I know we had chatted quite a while for before that.
Mm.
I've
And you know
I've
what? I
definitely bonded
distinctly
with you.
remember when I first met you that after we were going home for the night, you were like, Bronson, thank you so much for coming out today. It was great to have you here. And then, it's that part of thing where you foster that kind of community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
But yeah, man, like I said, I'd plug you, and I think you're a sweet dude. So come out to Orlando, come check us out. We're a fun group of people, and yeah, just play the game.